Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Psyched for the Future Virtual Symposium. Now I'll turn the microphone over to our presenters.
Thank you so much. Good morning, all. Welcome to Psyched for the Future. We really appreciate you taking time to join myself and our esteemed colleagues today to learn more about the world of psychology. My name is Dr. Shana Garrett, and I serve as the Dean for the College of Psychology and Community Services here at Walden. And I'm joined this morning by my esteemed colleague, Dr. Nabors, who is the Dean for the College of Allied Health, which includes the Clinical Psychology program. Nina, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. I'd like to add my welcome as well. Very excited to see your interest in our various psychology programs here at Walden. I'm just going to say a couple of words about psychology as a discipline. And I'm going to admit up front that, yes, I'm biased because I'm a clinical psychologist. But psychology is a very broad discipline, as you'll notice as you're listening to the various presentations throughout the day. And we're hoping that something's going to spark your interest, because again, we meet various aspects of our society. We're also really positioned as psychology to meet some of the current challenges that our society is facing, including crises like the ongoing pandemic, grief and loss, PTSD. I'll separate to that, divisions that we're facing. Psychology is really well matched for supporting all the different needs that our communities have. I want to talk just a teeny bit about sort of my own journey to psychology and just to give you a sense of how flexible it is as a degree. I have all three, my bachelor's, my master's, and my doctoral degree in psychology. And so I'm, again, really a big fan. And I've spent most of my professional career in academia, about 26 years actually. And I have been here at Walden for 21 as of September. So I'm not going to tell you how long that is in dog years. I've had a great career and a lot of flexibility in the kinds of things that I've been able to do. So in addition to working as a faculty member, teaching and mentoring students, I've also done a fair amount of research over the years, both publishing and presenting. And I serve as an administrator now and have for a number of years. And then I also have a private practice where I work with individuals and couples, helping them navigate the many challenges that we're facing as a society right now. So psychology has really served me well as a career to sort of meet all the different interests that I have professionally. And again, I'm happy to have you all learn about all the things that psychology focuses on here at Walden. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Garrett. And again, welcome and really glad to have you here.
Thank you so much, Nina. Greatly appreciate it. Ooh, I think we're getting a little bit of background noise. Oh, we're good. Okay. So I just wanted to also say a couple of words about psychology. For me, I've always been fascinated by psychology. I've been fascinated with various aspects of it. I find parts of it incredibly interesting, other parts not so much. And so I think one of the takeaways you're going to find today is that not everything's going to resonate, and some things are going to really resonate. Some things you're going to find you're going to want to know more, and you're going to want to see how it's applied. And for some things, you're going to be like, oh, okay, that's fine. That's interesting, and keep moving forward. And so that for me has been one of the great things about the field of psychology, is that I really truly feel there's something there for everybody, things to explore, whether that's the history of it or maybe it was an individual contributor that you found interesting, or a research study or something of that nature. Psychology goes way back. And I think that's something that a lot of folks are not aware of, is that it goes back considerably as early as 1550 BC, where the Egyptians were actually documenting psychological conditions like schizophrenia and depression. Moving forward, there were Hippocrates, Plato, and Aristotle were talking about, they truly believed that the mental disorders were actually coming from the brain and not the heart. We look at these things now and we go, why would they say something like that? But keep in mind, at that point, they didn't have a frame of reference. They didn't have just hundreds of years of research and documentation and evidence to make some of these decisions. The first known mental health hospital was back in 1547 in London. And that was actually the first time there was a hospital dedicated to treating mental health illnesses. So psychology's been around for quite some time. And there also are key figures that we've often hear about in psychology. And I'm sure many of you have heard some of these names, but I wanted to draw your attention to other individuals that have significant contributions to this field that haven't really had much attention. And so I want to give them the respect and honor their contributions to the field of psychology, because I know for many of us, their works have made such a difference in us, both personally but professionally. And so I wanted to share a few of those with you. Many of you have probably heard about William James, William Wundt, Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, Carl Rogers, Albert Maslow. You know some of those names, right? But I want to bring your attention to others that have just a tremendous impact. Mary Ainsworth, she was an important developmental psychologist. Her work demonstrated the importance of healthy childhood attachments, and she pioneered a technique known as the strain situation. If you don't know about it, research it, check it out. Her groundbreaking work had a major influence on understanding attachment styles and how this contributes to behavior in life. Karen Horney, if you're not familiar with her, she was a neo-Freudian. There's another term you can Google. But her take was on feminine psychology, in particular, her outspokenness about neurotic needs. And she believed that people were capable of taking a personal role in their mental health and for their resolution. So I definitely wanted to share her. Mary Whiton Calkins, she was the second woman to complete the work necessary for a PhD in psychology, but was actually not awarded the degree because Harvard did not formally admit women at the time. She later became the first woman to serve as the president for the American Psychological Association. Francis Cecil Sumner was the first African American to receive his PhD in psychology, helped establish the psychology department at Howard University to train African American psychologists. And his work, incredibly vast, discussed counteracted racism and bias in psychological studies for African Americans. And actually, some of his students went on to become leading psychologists in their own right. And one of them is Kenneth Clark, who's my next gentleman. His work was essential in the case of Brown versus Board of Education, wherein his findings concluded segregation was psychologically damaging. And because of his work, that actually played a key role in the Supreme Court decision to outlaw segregation. Additionally, he was the first Black president of the American Psychological Association. Inez Beverly Prosser, she was the first African American woman to receive her PhD. Her dissertation examined the academic development of African American children in mixed and segregated schools. And her findings showed that African American children fared better socially and academically in segregated schools. Beverly Daniel Tatum, widely recognized as a race relation expert and leader in higher education. Her areas of research included racial identity development and the role of race in the classroom. She argues that racial identity is essential to the development of children. So you can see that there is such a wide range of possibilities within the world of psychology. And if you have some curiosity or some interest about something, it just depends on where you decide to focus those energies and that effort. So I did want to take another moment, if you don't mind, to share with you some of the areas of psychology that you're going to hear about today. There's ABA, there's clinical psychology, there's educational psychology, forensic psych, general psych, IO psych, health, and school. And so I know I'm just throwing out these terms and you're probably like, okay, well, can you tell me a little bit more? What does that mean? So for ABA, that's just the acronym for Applied Behavior Analysis, which is a field of psychology focused on improving socially significant human behavior, such as social skills, reading, and communication, and more. Clinical psychology is the study, assessment, and treatment of illnesses relating to mental health and disabilities. Education psych is the study of how people learn and retain knowledge. General psych, it's what you think, right? It's general. It could be multiple perspectives, multiple disciplines, subdisciplines, things of that nature. Forensic psych, it's not just about what you see on TV, right? There's a lot that goes into practices and methods. That field typically looks at criminal behaviors, the court system, the correction systems. IO psych, which is industrial organizational psych, focuses on the implementation of psychological methods that works primarily with organization and employees to improve satisfactions and overall productivity. And again, I'm just giving you a couple of words and sentences to describe it. You'll hear more as we go in to the various sessions for today. But keep in mind that for all the conversations that we're having today and for the presenters and the various topics, that, and this is really the important part, is the educational requirements and the types of experiences needed depends upon the area of psychology that you're interested in, right? As Dr. Nabors was talking about being a clinical psychologist, there was so much that has gone into her experience, her education, leading up to licensure, things of that nature, right? Everybody has a different story. Everybody has a different path. And again, working with your education, your experiences, and what your end goal is, it's really important to make sure that you are doing your due diligence to understand what the required components are and the necessary elements are for ultimately what you would like to do in your particular field. Work and voluntary experience is incredibly important in your chosen field. It can include part-time work. It can include summer placements and internships. It can be work shadowing, things of that nature. Search for areas of your interest where you can put your academic learning into practice. For all of us, it wasn't just about the education. There was a tremendous amount of volunteer experience, work experience, supervised experience in order to get where we are. I know when I was working on my master's degree, I was required to do some external internship hours to support a licensure path that I decided to pursue independent of my academic program. And so I spent quite a bit of time volunteering at hospice care and at a facility that worked with Alzheimer's patients. And that was outside of my academic pursuits because of the route that I chose. So you're going to hear from folks today that they're going to talk about, well, I decided to go for this degree, but I decided to go for this type of licensure. And so I needed to, look to do this type of extracurricular activity or internships, volunteer hours, things of that nature. So without further ado, I'm thrilled to have you here with us today. Again, please use the chat. I think we're all going to be watching the chat to answer any questions that you possibly have. Don't be shy. Ask us questions. That's what we're here to do, is to help you maybe figure out if there's an area of interest that you would like to pursue. If you'd like to know something more, we all have a different story about how we are sitting where we're sitting and where psychology has taken us. So with that, I'll kind of wrap that up, but I appreciate hearing from folks what your interests are and what you're looking to do. And I think, Julie, keep me honest, we're ready to move into the next session, which I'd love to introduce several of our wonderful colleagues who will be answering some questions for us. And so I would like to introduce Dr. Alina Perez, who is, there's the slide. Thank you. She is the program director for the clinical psychology program. Dr. Amy Sickel, she is the program director for the Psych'd, the PhD in psychology, and Dr. Sreeroopa Sarkar, who is the program director over in education and developmental. And so with that, I'd like to ask the ladies to join me. And if you're ready, maybe you can just say hello and tell folks a little bit about your background before we jump into the first question. Will that work?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay. Amy, why don't you kick us off?
Sure, great. Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Amy Sickel, and I'm the program director for the PhD psychology program here at Walden. And in that capacity, I oversee our educational, health, social, doctoral programs, as well as our research and our teaching in psychology programs. And we also have a self-design. And my background is, I have a bachelor's degree in psychology with a minor in women's studies, and then a master's degree in counseling psychology. And my doctorate is in social psychology, applied social.
I can start next. Hello, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, good evening, depending on where on the earth you are. My name is Dr. Sreeroopa Sarkar. I am the program director for the developmental psychology master's and PhD program and MS in psychology programs at Walden. And my background is in educational psychology and with a concentration in human development. And I'm signing in from Portland, Oregon.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Dr. Alina Perez, and I'm the program director for the PhD in clinical psychology. A little bit of background on me. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, and all my degrees are in different areas of psychology. My bachelor's is in psychology, my master's is in forensic psychology, and my PhD is in clinical psychology with an emphasis on violence and risk assessment. I'm signing in from sunny and very hot and humid Miami, Florida today.
Great. Thank you. Whoops. And okay, so let's get started with the first question. And can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I just got an odd message saying I was muted. Technology is wonderful, right? And so Nina, if you've got time, we'd love to have you join us as well with a couple of questions. Awesome. Fantastic. So let me ask the first question. When did you first develop an interest in the field of psychology? And when did you know that you wanted it to be your chosen career?
I think I would take this one. I did not mention about my background initially because I was thinking about it, expanding on it a little bit later. I did not have an undergraduate degree in psychology. I was in India, I'm a native of India, and I had a bachelor's degree in history. I continued on, I had a master's degree in history. But throughout the whole process, I have been kind of thinking about, I was actually basically missing the human interaction part. I was dealing with a lot of archival data, history, you know what history involves, but I was missing the human interaction. I wanted to learn about psychology. I always have been fascinated by psychology, but I did not have an opportunity to have it in my undergraduate as well as my first master's degree. So that's the time I was applying for my master's and PhD in the United States. And I was thinking about looking into psychology because, as I mentioned, I have been fascinated by human development, human behavior, attitude, actions. Why do we do everything that we do? What is our thought processes? So those are the things that really interested me. At the same time, I wanted to have something in the educational setting. You know, all my family members are in teaching, professors, teachers. So I was like, I have to do something in academia, in educational setting. How people learn, how do they retain the knowledge, motivation, all those factors. So then came the program that I was looking for at a PhD in educational psychology with a focus on human development. And so I got my master's degree in educational psychology as well as my PhD in educational psychology. So that was my history.
Great, thank you. I'll jump out there. I didn't share, my bachelor's is in counseling psychology. And I just on a very surface level, I really enjoyed my psychology courses. And so that's where my interest started. And once I graduated, I actually became a paralegal and took a completely different turn, but then realized very quickly after several years of working criminal law and divorces and things of that nature, I found myself being drawn to helping folks rather than helping them on the legal side. And so I decided to go to graduate school and thoroughly loved my program, master's in clinical psychology. And for me, it was the faculty. It was the way the faculty brought the stories to life, talking about different theories, talking about some of the research, some of the studies that people conducted, some of the findings that came out. So for me, it really was the faculty just played a huge role in my decision to further explore psychology. And so after my master's, by that point, y'all, I was hooked. I enjoyed learning more about the people and the research, and really started to connect with certain theories that, and as you learn about psychology, you learn to look at things from a little bit different lens, right? You're really interested in learning about people and behaviors and actions and rationales and things of that nature. So my PhD is in clinical psychology. Absolutely love it. I do see clients. And so for me, it's really about that coming together of what I've learned from faculty, what I've witnessed as an individual, what I've witnessed professionally as well, and then really being able to pull it all together and see psychology come to life. And so for me, it's something that I continue to learn something new every day, and just love to explore and try to figure out what they were thinking when they came up with some of this stuff. It's entertaining.
I'm happy to add to that. And Shana, I appreciate your comments about your work after undergrad, because I was certainly interested in why people do what they do. I think that's probably something all of us had throughout most of our lives. And then I did major in psychology as an undergraduate. Social psych was by far my favorite course. But when I graduated, I didn't take a psychology job. Instead, I took a job. This is always so funny because it feels so long ago. I was selling corporate gifts. I literally would walk around and this was in the Washington, D.C. area, which is where I live now in Maryland. And I would go to businesses and try to sell corporate gifts. And I realized how unhappy I was when at about 11 months, I was offered a promotion because my boss was leaving. She went on to Tiffany's to go sell big corporate gifts, and they offered me the job to run where we were. And I'm like, I quit. I quit. I had no job lined up. I just left. I was like, this is just so not me. So at that point, then I took a much lower paying job, working with adolescents who had substance abuse issues. And I was so much happier. And in college too, I had some jobs that were more, I did residential counselor work, and the jobs just felt to me so much more substantive, so much more interesting. That pretty much from that point on, when I quit that job, I knew I was going to find my way back. I didn't know exactly where I wanted to go within the field, but yeah.
I can add some too. So I was actually well on my way to medical school early on, and I thought I wanted to be a psychiatrist until I had to take a work study job as a very poor student who had no job and needed money. So part of financial aid, I took on a work study job as a research assistant in my undergrad's psychology lab. And I fell in love. I thought, wow, this is really interesting. And I didn't know that all of this other area of psychology existed. So it was actually through research that I ended up changing my major. But because I was well on the way to med school, I ended up with almost 3 majors by the end of my undergrad, and decided I wanted to, further my education in psychology. And so when I graduated, I too didn't have a direction, but decided, you know what, I think I want to explore forensic psychology, because I had taken an elective course in undergrad and found it just so interesting. And so I did. I jetted off to New York City and decided I was going to get my master's in forensic psychology, and the story evolved, and here I am as a clinical psychologist because I fell in love with the discipline. So definitely varying experiences, I think.
Absolutely.
You know, I'm hearing a theme, right? That we all sort of took a bit of a circuitous route to get to where we are. And my story is similar. I too started off head to med school, Alina, and it was organic chemistry that did me in. I was just like, okay, that's not happening, right? So I took a personality class because all of my classes had been biology, chemistry, kinds of classes, and I took a personality class, and you just never know, what, one person says will sort of move you in a direction. I'm answering questions. I'm not shy about raising my hand. And after one of the classes, the instructor's like, have you ever thought about, majoring in psychology? And I was like, no. He's like, you're really good at it. And I was like, oh, think so? And it sort of sparked my interest and, switched over to psychology. But yeah, like Alina, I had like a bio major, a bio minor, chemistry minor, right? Because we just had so many courses from, the med school idea. And then I went into the master's in clinical psych and really sort of fell in love. But after a couple of years was like, okay, I need a break from being evaluated. And so decided to work for a couple of years as a social worker, interestingly enough, and much respect for social workers. But like, yeah, no, this is not something I could do long-term. But I worked in a rehabilitation hospital for individuals with traumatic brain injury. And so that was sort of my introduction into neuropsychology and rehabilitation psychology. And so decided to go back to pursue my PhD in clinical psych at a university back in the early 90s that specialized in clinical neuropsychology. So that's actually was my specialization. And I had all intentions of going right into practice after, because that's what you're sort of trained for, do a neuropsychological assessment of folks with brain injury and so forth and so on. And so I'm all prepared for that, finishing up my degree, planning to start postdoctoral fellowship. And then I'm at a conference. In fact, I think I was on my fellowship, my postdoctoral fellowship, run into one of my old professors from the doctoral program who was one of my research mentors. And he's like, so how's it going? Just chatting. And he says, so have you thought about teaching? And I was like, well, sure. I'm probably going to give back adjunct, No. You should think about a teaching career. And it's just weird how things happen. And so there I am thinking, okay. And so, I find myself on a tenure track, at a university. You just never know what direction your life's going to take. And it kind of took off from there. And I've loved all of the choices that I've made that have gotten me to this point. And so you just never know what well-placed comments, will sort of lead you in a particular direction.
Nina, you're spot on. And that leads me to my next question for the group is, were there any unexpected turns or barriers that showed up in your path to get to where you are?
Well, I can start again, I guess. Yes, when I was doing my PhD, I finished coursework, started working on my dissertation, and I was collecting some data from international backgrounds in India and Sri Lanka. So I did collect the data, started working on it, defended my proposal. And that's the time when the university told us, we have a limit on 4 years teaching assistantships, and now you are on your own. So that was a big shocker for me. I was like, wow, which I kind of knew about it, but I thought they always extended, but they don't. I used to go for a State University of New York, so there are some limitations there. So that's when I was like, how do I finish it? So luckily that time I was offered a job at the same university as the assistant director for graduate studies. So I was basically advising, doing a lot of administrative job. And honestly, that really saved my PhD because I really didn't know how to pay for my tuition and complete the study. Being an international student, it was particularly very difficult. So I took up the job that time. At the same time, I was doing my, I collected my data, luckily by then, and I was doing a qualitative research. And it was a very interesting topic. I was looking at, gender as a cultural factor influencing mental health among school-age female students in India and Sri Lanka. Phenomenal study. I was doing a great job. Only thing I think back, it was not a mistake, but I could have focused it down. I had an interview with 178 students for a qualitative study. Took me long time. Now that we, advise students, we tell them keep it to 25, 30 participants when we're doing a qualitative study. I didn't do that. So that took me a little longer. But what I would say, I gained at the same time, actually, I was teaching for the same university at the undergraduate level. Obviously, I didn't have the PhD back then, so I started teaching at the undergraduate level as an adjunct assistant professor. No, I started as an adjunct lecturer, and I became an adjunct assistant professor. They're all part-time because I was working full-time, but that gave me an enormous opportunity to acquire administrative experiences. Particularly I was advising students, I was counseling, doing everything in education and counseling, psychology. So that gave me enough experiences also about other fields of psychology, so what the students needed to prepare for those. So basically that barrier gave me a wonderful turn where I acquired all the administrative experiences, which really helped me later in my life when I applied for this job at Walden. So.
That's great.
Thanks.
I could add in there a little bit in terms of barriers I see or unexpected turns. I honestly think that first job selling corporate gifts was one of those first barriers. And then, I went on to get my master's degree in actually counseling psychology. And my second year of that was spent, this was up in Boston, and I did an internship at one of the colleges up there in the counseling center. And while I liked it, I also realized I don't really want to be a therapist. I don't want that to be, I'm not interested in doing that for my life. So that was a big moment and a big inflection point for me to realize I really wanted to focus more on the research side and teaching side of things. So that was very helpful. And then from that, I went and found a research position, which was actually in a clinical area at a psychiatric hospital, but the research study was so big. They looked at, biological, psychological, social markers of health. And that just took me miles away in my thinking and really expanded the way I approached what I was going to be doing in the future. And that's how I eventually got myself back to doing social psychology, because I decided I would next go and apply for the doctorate there. So that's kind of my very, I see it as a very non-linear path.
Absolutely.
And I'll add some as well. So some unexpected barriers for myself. I have a few, but I guess the first one would be actually during my doctoral program. I was in an internship and decided at that time I was starting a family. And so life happened. And as much as I did not want to stop, I did. I had to take a break after my internship was over, because you can't take a break during an internship. A very long, difficult year, but got through it, and then took a break before I engaged in my dissertation. So my PhD actually took a lot longer than my life plan had allowed, or at least that I had planned for. But in the end, life happened, and I blended the two, and was able to earn my PhD. I then worked for some time with the court system as a mental health coordinator for their misdemeanor division. And the court decided to downsize. So after about 6 years in my position, they downsized and cut my position. And I didn't have a plan at that point. So I floundered around a little bit, worked for Department of Children and Families and Substance Abuse Utilization Management. And similar to Amy, I said, yeah, this is not for me. I lasted 4 months. And it's basically doing substance abuse assessments to place people in different levels of treatment. And so that's how I found my way to teaching. I had a friend who's a colleague said, hey, have you ever thought about teaching? And I said, no, not really. And so I shadowed her for probably a week at a local university. It was actually a blended program. So they did both on ground and virtual, and thought, wow, this looks really interesting. And so I gave it a shot as an adjunct, and really fell in love with that aspect of the profession. And so I decided that I wanted to wear 2 hats at that point and do both the clinical side and the academic side, because neither one alone was going to be enough for me professionally, fulfilling wise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. I'll keep us moving because we've got a little less than 10 minutes. Great conversation. And I love the fact that we're kind of all reflecting a bit more, or reflecting back when we were all in grad school. And so I'm just kind of curious, if you go back to when you were in grad school, could you imagine that you would be working in the field the way you are now? Could you see, did you ever think, this is where you'd land?
No.
No, go ahead.
I would say yes and no, because I always, when I was doing my PhD, I wanted to teach. Of course, I wanted to be a professor, but as you guys mentioned, life happened and I had to take the job up. That gave me a lot of administrative experiences. So I always wanted to teach. So when this Walden job opened up, I think that was a perfect combination for me, where I could combine all my experiences as an administrator, helping the students, putting out fires, advising them, as well as teaching part-time. So that's why I said yes and no. So I always knew I wanted to teach. I didn't know I wanted to be an administrator, and this job came up where I'm doing both. So yeah, in short, yes, I didn't expect to be exactly in this position, but I expected to be partly in this position, but it worked out perfectly.
I agree. I definitely didn't anticipate this exact position. I certainly anticipated doing research and teaching, both of which, well, I haven't done teaching at Walden in a while, but both of which I have done with Walden, and I'm doing some research now. But, honestly, when I got out of my graduate program, I went to school in DC here, and then I did a postdoc. After that, kind of like Alina says, life comes along. At that point, I was ready to start a family after I graduated. I honestly had very little familiarity back then with online learning. I think I'd heard very little about it. Everything I had done was brick and mortar. And I was on a listserv. It's actually a very interesting feminist listserv, and somebody there worked here, and it caught my attention. And I reached out to that person and looked into a job here, and I started out as contributing faculty. So I certainly, this was back in 2005. So I really had no plans, except it was interesting. I was curious. I liked very much, it felt progressive, and it felt the social change mission was really appealing. So all of these things together made the timing right. I definitely couldn't have anticipated that. And I know that at the time that I started this, I'll be candid with you, a lot of people at some of the programs I was at would be not terribly supportive of online learning. And so it was very different for me, and I was extremely curious, and it worked out to be a very, very satisfying, gratifying fit. I definitely didn't anticipate the program director or the administrative piece. For a while, I didn't really consider that. So eventually it all falls into place one way or another. We find our ways.
I think that's so true. I mean, just hearing about challenges and pathways and our personal experiences. I mean, I was not a fan of school. I mean, talk to any of my friends growing up, school was just not my thing. And somewhere, somehow, because of psychology and those experiences and the faculty members, it just made such a difference. And, as I'm listening to everybody's stories, there's been so many twists and turns and challenges and interest and goals that it comes down to just knowing what you want and being persistent, but at the same time being open and flexible to the changes that come our way. I was working as a graduate assistant at my university while I was getting my master's, and was approached by somebody on the administrative team about a full-time job. I mean, that doesn't happen. It just doesn't. But they saw my work ethic and said, we can teach you the other parts of it, but it's the work ethic that we're interested in. And so they were willing to take a chance. So I took a chance. It wasn't exactly in my path. It wasn't in my plan, but it was what was afforded to me. Right. I mean, so as I'm listening to everybody's stories, it's about trial, and it's either something you like or it's not. You're either good at it or you're not. It's something that holds your interest, whatever the case may be. But in every one of your stories, I heard flexibility and being open and receptive and being curious about, I'll try this. Do I like it? Yeah. Do I not? Not so much. Right. And so I think I think with psychology, you have the flexibility to make those shifts and those adjustments. At least that's kind of what I'm hearing from folks.
Right, absolutely. I also think another message is sort of being in the right place at the right time, right? I mean, my story is sort of similar to everyone else's, where, I had no, I'd always, or once I figured out that I wanted to teach, that was the goal, teaching and research, but certainly administrative work was not on the radar at all, actually. And I won't tell you how old I am, but I started with Walden in 2001. And there was very little information available about online learning at that point. And so I'm, tenure track faculty in a brick and mortar institution, and some of my colleagues are teaching. And I was like, well, that's interesting. And so signed up. And what's interesting is I worked at both brick and mortar and Walden at the same time. I earned tenure at a brick and mortar institution. And what I noticed was the difference in the student population between the two groups. And I really enjoyed my work with Walden students. I loved working with folks who were a little older, had more experience, had a better sense of what they were looking for. And so when the opportunity came in 2005 to move to a full-time position, I actually left tenure to do just that and haven't looked back. It's just been an amazing experience. I agree with Amy, and fits really well with who I am, but the kinds of research I've been able to mentor here with Walden students and to learn about all the amazing things that our students are doing has just been really enriching. I agree, Shana, that the flexibility is just huge with this type of degree.
Absolutely. Well, ladies, I want to thank you so much for your contributions and for sharing your experiences. I know I've learned something new about every one of you, and we've all worked together for years. And so I'm honored for that. And I hope those that are joining us, I hope you heard a couple of stories that really resonated with you or sparked some curiosity to learn more. So I do know we are down to literally our last minute, and I believe the next session is starting. So ladies, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. So thank you so much. And I think we're ready to go to the next session on IO career paths. Thank you so much, ladies. Have a great day.